The space race. American President John F. Kennedy in 1961 said, "I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. No single space project will be more exciting or more impressive to mankind or more important, and none will be so difficult or expensive to accomplish." What was the space race and how did it begin? At the beginning of the space race, there were no set rules. What was the goal? What would count as winning? For the Americans, President Kennedy's declaration focused the space race on landing a man on the moon before the Soviets. Therefore, the space race became a race to the moon. For years, the Soviets denied being a race to the moon. Now the Cold War is over, available evidence proves that they were competing to reach the moon first. The Soviet Union leads the way. In October 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the world's first satellite. Sputnik was unexpected and demonstrated the technical achievements of the Russians. The Russians were both upset and scared at being left behind by their rivals. In November 1957, the Soviets sent a stray dog from the streets of Moscow into orbit. It was a one-way trip for the dog, named Laika, who died from the extreme heat shortly after leaving the atmosphere. The Russians kept this quiet, but claimed a clear lead in the space race. The US did not have their first successful satellite until 1958, with Explorer 1. The American media and Congress demanded to know how the Soviets had beaten them into space. They responded by establishing the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA. The 4th of October 1959, 2 years after Sputnik, the Soviets sent the first unmanned spacecraft around the moon, which recorded images of the moon's far side and broadcast them to Earth. And on the 12th of April 1961, the Soviets sent the first man into space, Yuri Gagarin. He circled the Earth once and returned safely. It was another 10 months before the Americans and their astronaut John Glenn did the same. On the 18th of March 1965, Alexey Leonov became the first man to leave an orbiting spacecraft when he spent 20 minutes in the vacuum of space. The US's attempt to reach the moon. In January 1967, during training for the first Apollo mission, 3 astronauts died when a fire erupted in their spacecraft on the launch pad. US manned flights were stopped for nearly 2 years while the Apollo spacecraft was redesigned. The pace to the moon quickened from 1968. In September 1968, Soviet unmanned flights around the moon and also returned them to the Earth. On October 1968, the Apollo 7 had a successful manned test flight in service module. December 1968, the Soviet manned flight to the moon is cancelled. In May 1969, Apollo 10 from the United States test flight descends from space to a low level above the moon. In July 1969, the Soviets' attempt to gain the first lunar rock is a failure. If this robotic mission had succeeded, the Soviets would have gained lunar rock hours before the United States. First past the winning post. On July 21, 1969, as millions of people watched around the world, 2 Americans from Apollo 11 mission stepped onto another world for the first time and returned successfully. The landing was celebrated as an epic technological achievement and a triumph of the human spirit.